In today's episode, See Life Differently, The Mystery of Self Uncovered, we'll explore ways to bring more clarity, calm, and mindfulness into your day. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button so you won't miss any of the inspiring stories and wisdom we'll share next. Have you ever noticed how deeply real the I feels? That quiet voice inside, that sense of being at the center of everything you think, feel, or do. It's so immediate, so intimate, that we rarely pause to question it. We assume this self is solid, unchanging, and separate from our thoughts and emotions, like a captain steering the ship of our lives. But what if it isn't? What if this sense of I is more like a story we've been telling ourselves all along? The Buddha asked exactly this question, not to make us doubt ourselves or feel lost, but to open a door to freedom. He suggested that the self we cling to may not exist as we imagine it. Think about it. Every thought, every sensation, every choice arises and passes. And yet, behind them, we feel there's someone permanent experiencing it all. But can you point to this someone? Have you ever actually seen it? Or is it simply assumed into existence because our minds need a center? This is not just philosophy. It's an invitation to explore what it truly means to be you beyond the voice in your head, beyond the story you tell yourself, and to discover a sense of freedom that doesn't depend on holding on to an I. Imagine what life could feel like if the grip of this illusion loosened even just a little. Now that we've started to question the idea of I, let's look at what happens when we cling to it. Believing in a permanent, separate self isn't harmless. It quietly shapes our lives in ways we barely notice. This belief fuels craving, attachment, pride, and fear. Every time we imagine that our happiness depends on something outside or that our identity must be defended, we're setting ourselves up for suffering. The Buddha put it plainly in the Dhammapada: from craving springs grief, from craving springs fear. Think about that for a moment. How often have you felt anxious, frustrated, or upset simply because you were protecting your sense of me, mine, or my story? That anxiety, that tension in your chest isn't caused by the world. It's caused by the attachment to an imagined self. This isn't abstract philosophy or something only monks need to understand. It's real life, happening in every choice, every interaction, every time we worry about being right, seen, or in control. The fascinating thing is, the self that feels so solid, this I we protect, is actually the root of much of our pain. By seeing it clearly, not just thinking about it, but observing it in our own experience, we can start to loosen its grip. Imagine how life might change if fear and grief no longer had a personal center to cling to. That's the doorway the Buddha invites us to step through. So, if clinging to the idea of a permanent self creates so much suffering, the next question is, what exactly is this self we cling to? To explore this, the Buddha offered a remarkable framework in the Anattalakkhana Sutta, known as the teaching of the five aggregates, or Panchakanda. These are the building blocks of what we usually call a person. But here's the twist. None of them, individually or together, can be called a permanent self. Let's break them down. The first aggregate is form, or rupa, the physical body. At first glance, it seems solid, familiar, undeniably you. But the body is never static. It's constantly changing. Cells die and rebuild. Bones grow and decay. organs age and regenerate. Imagine a wave insisting, "I am the ocean," or a flame declaring, "I will never flicker." The body is much the same, always in motion, always impermanent. Claiming, "I am my body," is like claiming the wave is the ocean itself. It's a convenient story, but not reality. The second aggregate is feeling, or Vedana, our sensations of pleasure, pain, or neutrality. Joy arises, lingers briefly, and fades. Pain comes, grips us, and then passes. If you define yourself as your feelings, then you are constantly dying and being reborn with every emotional shift. This explains why moods are so unpredictable and why emotional clinging often leads to suffering. Feelings are fleeting. They cannot be the stable self we imagine. Next is perception, or sanjana, the mind's ability to recognize patterns, label experiences, and interpret reality. You see a tree and name it tree. You hear a sound and call it music. You meet a person and decide they are a friend or a foe. But perceptions change. What you feared yesterday may feel harmless today. What you loved might now feel distant. Perception is like confusing a map for the terrain. It points to reality, but it is not reality itself. The self cannot be found in shifting labels. The fourth aggregate is mental formations, or sankhara, our thoughts, intentions, habits, and emotional tendencies. These are the currents behind our choices and impulses. But notice how many of our thoughts are shaped by upbringing, culture, mood, or countless unconscious patterns. Even what we call free will is conditioned. The idea of a stable I choosing freely behind these thoughts is deeply questionable. What we call me is largely the product of causes and conditions, not an independent agent. Finally, we have consciousness, or vijnana, the awareness that knows experience. Consciousness isn't a constant light illuminating everything from a hidden vantage point. It arises dependent on objects and sense organs, sight with eyes and forms, sound with ears and vibrations, and so on. Awareness appears and vanishes moment by moment. There is no self-sufficient observer behind the scenes, only a flowing stream of experience. When we examine these 5 aggregates together, form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness, we see something striking. There is no solid, permanent self hiding behind our experiences. What we call me is not a singular entity, but a system, a constantly shifting, interdependent process. The body changes, feelings come and go, perceptions shift, thoughts are conditioned, and consciousness arises in dependence. This is not nihilism. Existence is real, but the self as we imagine it is not.
Because the mind has a natural habit of spinning every experience into a story, a process the Buddha called papancha, or mental proliferation. A simple sound isn't just heard, it becomes my annoyance. A fleeting thought isn't just noticed, it becomes this is who I am. In every moment, the mind rushes in to make a narrator out of me, inserting a protagonist into the story of life. That imagined I feels so real, so personal, that we rarely recognize it as a creation rather than a fact. Interestingly, modern neuroscience offers a striking parallel. Studies of the brain show there is no single command center, no self sitting at the controls. Instead, networks like the default mode network constantly construct stories, connecting memories, imagining the future, and linking them through a central character, you. Philosopher Daniel Dennett calls this the center of narrative gravity. Just like a captainless ship is still guided by the motion of the water and wind, the sense of self emerges as a narrative device, a functional story our brain tells to make sense of experience. Here's the insight. The self isn't a physical entity or a permanent observer. It's a story our mind invents to create coherence and meaning. Once you recognize this, the grip of fear, pride, and attachment begins to loosen. Life is still happening, the joys, the sorrows, the challenges, but you are no longer trapped in a personal narrative that demands constant defense or control. You begin to see that the I you cling to is simply a lens, a pattern of thought, not the essence of who you are. As we explore the illusion of self and how it persists in our minds, the natural question is, how do we actually step out of it? Can thinking harder or analyzing more finally free us? The answer is no. The mind that creates the illusion cannot dismantle it through logic alone. Understanding conceptually is not enough. True freedom comes through direct, experiential knowing. As the Buddha advised in the Kalama Sutta, do not go by reasoning or tradition, by hearsay or by mere texts. Know for yourselves. This knowing isn't intellectual. It's a way of seeing reality clearly, moment by moment. And the Buddha offered a practical path for this transformation, traditionally expressed through 3 interwoven trainings: ethics, concentration, and wisdom.
Ethics, or sila, is where it begins. It's not about rigid rules or guilt. It's about creating conditions for clarity. When we stop harming others and ourselves, the mind becomes less restless, less caught up in defending or constructing a self. Ethical living clears the mental turbulence, giving us space to see clearly. Next comes concentration, or samadhi. Through meditation, we train the mind to become steady and observant, noticing thoughts, feelings, and sensations as they arise without grabbing onto them. You begin to see thoughts come and go, feelings appear and fade, and even the sense of I shift naturally. Concentration isn't about suppressing the mind. It's about intimate awareness without entanglement. Finally, wisdom, or panya, is the direct insight into impermanence, conditionality, and the absence of a fixed self. Here, the mind no longer looks for a center or a controller. The self that once felt permanent starts to dissolve, not abruptly, but gradually, like fog lifting to reveal a vast, open landscape. The outcome is profound. Life is no longer experienced as a possession to guard or a story to defend. Instead, existence flows naturally. Anxiety, fear, and the desperate drive to control lose their grip. What once felt like mine becomes simply part of a larger, interconnected movement. The sense of living with a permanent self fades, replaced by clarity, freedom, and a deep sense of presence. In this space, we are not losing life, we are gaining it. We experience the world fully, but without the constant burden of a self to protect. The path the Buddha points to is not theoretical, it is practical, lived, and available to anyone willing to look honestly at their own experience. And the first step is simply to begin noticing, moment by moment, without judgment, the story your mind is telling, and realizing it is not the ultimate truth. At this point, a natural question arises. If there is no fixed self, what happens when we die? And if I is just a story, what gives life its meaning? These are profound questions, and the Buddha addresses them in the Udana. He speaks of the unborn, unbecome, unmade, unconditioned, a reality that is not dependent on creation, on clinging, or on identity.
This is not some distant mystical realm. It is the freedom that becomes visible when the machinery of craving and attachment is brought to rest. But what does liberation really mean in practical terms? It is not disappearance or emptiness in a nihilistic sense. Rather, it is a disentangling from the constant need to maintain I and mine. Life continues, the world continues, relationships, actions, and experiences all remain, but the centrality of me dissolves. Imagine being the ocean rather than the wave, the stage rather than the actor. You exist fully, but you are no longer trapped in the drama of a personal narrative. You witness the flow of life without being consumed by it. This shift is subtle but transformative. You don't lose the beauty of moments, the colors of experience, or the connection with others. Instead, you gain spaciousness. Anxiety, fear, and the desperate drive to control begin to fall away naturally. You move through life with a sense of presence and freedom that was impossible when clinging to a permanent self.
And here's the essential insight. The Buddha does not ask us to believe this on faith. He points the way, but the actual seeing must come from your own direct experience. No one can take this step for you. True freedom is resting in reality as it is, unbound by the stories your mind tells about me. When you can rest here, without grasping or resisting, life is experienced fully and unencumbered. The illusion of self no longer controls you, and what remains is the vast, open space of reality and the quiet, profound joy of simply being alive. As we come to the close of this exploration, let's take a moment to step back and see the full picture. What have we discovered about the self? At its core, the self, the I we cling to, is an illusion. It is a construct created by craving, attachment, and mental habits that constantly weave experience into a story centered on me. This isn't just a philosophical idea. It's something we can observe in our own minds if we look closely. The Buddha's teaching of the 5 aggregates helps us understand this clearly. Form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. These are the building blocks of what we usually call a person. Each one is impermanent, constantly changing, and dependent on conditions. Your body ages, your emotions shift, your perceptions evolve, and even consciousness arises and fades in relation to experience. None of these are fixed, and none can be claimed as a permanent self. But why does the sense of I feel so real? That's where mental proliferation comes in. The mind automatically spins experiences into stories. This is mine. I like this. This is who I am. The narrative of the self arises not as a thing, but as a pattern, a way our mind organizes life. Modern neuroscience echoes this, showing how networks in the brain construct continuous stories that give rise to the feeling of a central I. The path the Buddha offers is not just intellectual, it is practical and experiential. Through the threefold training of ethics, concentration, and wisdom, we begin to see the impermanent, processual nature of existence firsthand. Ethical living calms the mind. Meditation strengthens awareness, and wisdom reveals the absence of a fixed self. Step by step, the illusion loosens its grip, not just through thinking, but through lived experience. And the most remarkable part, life doesn't stop. The world continues, relationships continue, and experiences continue, but without the constant pressure of defending or preserving a me. What was once possession becomes flow. Fear and attachment soften. Clarity, presence, and freedom arise naturally. By seeing the self as a process rather than a fixed entity, we open the door to life fully lived, alive, awake, and unbound. This is the heart of the teaching. The self is not gone. It is revealed for what it always was, a story, a pattern, a lens through which life is experienced. And in seeing this clearly, freedom is already here.